You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, book lovers. You know, we love it at BOOKSTORM when we get an author who comes back on our show a second time. And we have the amazingly talented Lisa Unger with us today. You remember her from last year with Secluded Cabin, Sleep 6. Now we've got the new couple in 5B. And let me tell you what, you are going to love it. Lisa, welcome back to BOOKSTORM.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back here with you guys. Let me turn that off right now.
And we were just chatting it up with Lisa before we went live here because we feel like we're friends now, and we could probably have spoken for about an hour. She's just a wonderful person. We're very happy to have you. But before we get started, let me give our listeners a little bit of your bio because it is really amazing and you deserve the accolade. Now, you already know that Lisa Unger is the New York Times and an internationally best-selling author of 21 novels. Her books have been published in 33 languages with millions of copies sold. She is known as the master of suspense. We couldn't agree more. She's gotten a lot of accolades from places like Today Show, Good Morning America, best books from Entertainment Weekly, People, Amazon, Goodreads, LA Times, Boston Globe. I could go on and on. Something else she has is 2 Edgar Award nominations. And for those of you listeners who don't know what that is, it is an honor held by only a few authors, including Agatha Christie. Very impressive. Congratulations. She is the current co-president of the International Thriller Writers Organization, of course, and she lives on the west coast of Florida. We're so happy to have Lisa Unger back with us for a second time.
Thank you for having me. It's always so much fun to hang out with you guys. I love it.
Oh, absolutely. And Lisa, as Chris mentioned, we're here to talk about your new thriller, The New Couple in 5B. And I like to give our listeners just a little bit of the background of the story without giving away spoilers, which is quite tricky in this situation. So if you'll allow me, I would just want to,
I
just
would
tell
love
them a
to.
little bit about what's going on. Okay. Now, in this story, Rosie and Chad Lowen are a couple living in an apartment in New York City, and they don't have a lot of money. They're struggling a bit trying to make ends meet. And one day they learn that Chad's late uncle has left them an apartment at the historic and fictional Windermere. And it's in Tony Murray Hill in Manhattan. And this is a true luxury, beautiful, elegant building. There's a uniform doorman, there's these exquisite touches throughout the building, but there's also a dark history. And at first, the building and its tenants are very welcoming. They have a party to welcome the new tenants, Chad and Rosie. But then pretty soon Rosie starts to notice a few things that have her a bit unsettled. She sees cameras in places she doesn't expect them. There's locked rooms where maybe there shouldn't be a locked room. And there's been a history of some violent crimes that have happened at the building. Now, as she starts to dig for a little bit of the truth about what's going on here, she is coming up against not just a dark history, but maybe a very uncertain future for herself. Did you want to add anything to that summary?
Honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Excellent.
That was
Well,
Okay,
and yeah,
dive
go right ahead,
in.
Chris.
We're going to dive right in because I have to give our listeners some teasers. Okay, first of all, I read this book in one afternoon. I devoured it. Let's talk about some stuff like sixth sense, intuitions, visions, dreams, deja vu, premonitions. We've all felt something. Rose had prophetic visions. Dr. Black, her psychiatrist, told her that activities of her mind were fantasy. We must push them away in favor of the real world that's right in front of us. Someone in the book, and I'm not going to say who, thinks, I think there's more in heaven and earth than we will ever know. I loved that.
Mm.
How did the belief in the unseen world both help and hinder your characters and maybe some of us in the real world?
Yeah, it's interesting. Over the years, I have done a little bit of diving into this other side. I think that there's always the tendency to call it like the supernatural or the paranormal, but all those words really mean is that they're slightly more than natural, slightly more than normal or beyond normal. And so when I dive into those things as an author, I'm really only looking at it in the most Jungian possible way. In that, Carl Jung believed that there was more to the capacity of the human mind and to the psycho-spiritual realm than science has been willing to explore. And I believe that that's true. So I often find myself sort of veering into that direction, even in my thrillers, which are, not supernatural, not paranormal, but that they have that, like, maybe that curiosity. So in this case, Rosie comes from a family of what she is convinced in her mind are a family of charlatans. Her mother's a tarot card reader, her father is a healer, her sister is something they call a dreamer, somebody who has dreams. And then Rosie herself has, sort of these daymares or visions. And so she and her father very much so encouraged that as being like part of her a gift that she had to see the future. But Rosie is broken from her family, and she considers them to be, her father especially, she considers to be a liar, and that she has turned to the world of academia and, science and knowledge to make sense of herself and her life, right? So she has a psychologist, Dr. Black, who is very much so like, well, most people when their children have daymares or visions or ideas tell them that it's not real and that you need to snap out of it and pay attention to what's right in front of your face. But your family didn't do that. So now you don't know how to do that for yourself. So that's his explanation. Is that the explanation? We don't know. Later when Rosie goes back to see her father, he asks her, "Are you so sure that science is right and that I am the liar?" And that's a sort of an open question in the book.
I love that you used it as an open question, but there is a
Yeah,
mystery to be solved here. And you put
that's so true.
forth another suspect that we had to consider without
Mhm.
giving any spoilers. And, it's something we can all relate to. We've all had, even if it's just a sense of, I don't think I better walk down that dark alley. I don't know why. Something doesn't feel right. We can
Right.
all relate to it. We listen to it and we should listen to it, but maybe there's sometimes when we shouldn't listen to it if it's blocking our growth or our future.
Yes. Yeah. And that's always kind of a balancing act that I think that we all kind of try to strike the line there, don't we? I mean, we all have things that we really don't want to do, right? But that we know we have to push ourselves to do them because we have a sense that we're going to grow personally because of those things. And then there are those moments of really, very powerful intuition where it's like, no, don't go there, don't do that, or yes, go there, do that. And so I think finding that balance is, I mean, that's definitely something that that's something that Rosie has to do. But I think that we all have to do that in our lives. It's like part of our self-knowledge, right? Is to understand what is fear, when is it fear talking? And when is it intuition? And I always think, fear is like very much so like chatter, like, oh my gosh, and what if we do this and then that and blah blah blah, and it's like a very chattery, nervous voice. And intuition tends to be quieter and more calm, more knowing. And so that, for me anyway, that tends to be the difference. It may be something, maybe a different inner dialogue for everybody.
That's a good point.
Very interesting. I want to talk about the idea that a building or a neighborhood can have, its own energy or a certain personality. In your story, this takes place in the fictional The Windermere, and it's a grand pre-war luxury, beautiful building. And it has kind of its own, character, and in the book, it is a character. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because you were flirting with the idea of whether or not a building with a history could redeem itself or have a new energy or something that could change the future for the families living in it. And I wanted to ask you about that. Is that something you were interested in exploring?
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's something that I have explored again and again. Places, land, homes, in this case, an apartment, always have a special role in my books. You know, I have a fictional town called the Hollows, which has a little bit of a cameo in The New Couple. That is a character, that it has a personality. And so I think that, when you're thinking about just in like sort of the most banal way, like the apartment in The New Couple in 5B is kind of modeled after the apartment where my aunt lived when I was a kid. So I had a very glamorous aunt, and she worked in fashion, and this was her apartment in Park Avenue, and it was a elevator man building, and it was like, for me, it was like an iconic, like kind of dream New York City apartment. But my aunt was a very complicated woman, so visits there were always very, very layered. And so I kind of brought a little bit of that piece with me, right? The idea that, you have a relationship to a place, right? That places store energy, that there are events that occur, within a home, within a building, on a piece of land, that stay with that land. And that land or that home is a body that can be healed, that can be harmed, and hopefully maybe healed as well. I mean, why wouldn't it be so, right? Because everything springs from nature, right? Everything comes from nature, even if it's from human nature. So obviously, we spend so much time as a culture building our homes, right? I mean, so much art and engineering and science is devoted to creating our dwellings. I mean, it is an act of nature to create a dwelling. It's an act of human nature to shelter ourselves. And so why wouldn't these places hold and store energy like any other organic matter?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the piece that it does come up for me again and again. And also like places like that apartment, and like my grandmother's like row house in Bay Ridge where she lived for, most of my life. Like there are places that live so vividly in my memory, and they do wind up turning up. Even Rosie and Chad's apartment in this is like an echo from Beautiful Eyes. The apartment in Beautiful Eyes was my apartment that I inhabited when I was a student at the new school. That's where I lived, in the East Village. And so like these places inhabit, our imagination forever. You probably still remember your childhood home very vividly, right? So why then would they forget us?
Yeah. And I love that Rosie wrestled with the idea of what would it take to change that energy and to redeem that place. She didn't just write it off. And so I
Right.
thought that was excellent.
Which I think is just sort of is really more of an allegory about abuse. When do we break the chain? It takes one person to break that chain of abuse, like abuse, and in the way she experienced it, or maybe she did or she didn't, the gaslighting and the lies and the con. Like where do you have to be in your life to say, no, this is not coming forward into the next generation. I am not bringing this cycle of abuse to my child.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
this book was so deep and mesmerizing. That's one word that keeps coming to mind, because you were exploring these really, really deep topics, but that resonate with us because we're all experiencing these life issues, dealing with difficult people, with abuse, and how do you
Definitely.
move forward? And so it's a
Yeah,
very hopeful book, but
I think so.
thrilling.
Yeah.
Well,
I like to, walk through the dark into the light. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do, I think.
it was a lot of fun. So Rosie said something in this book, and I'm going to quote it, but I'm going to tell you on the side, I have now used this quote in my life at least 2 to 3 times. And
Perfect.
it's simple and we know it, but no one seldom comes right out and says it. Rosie says, the thing is never about the thing. Meaning, and I'm going to quote her explanation, when you're angry, hurt, or in despair about something, it's rarely about the situation before you or not just about that. Wow. Yes, it's true. So, how did Rosie, Chad, and all of us sometimes we cause our own life problems when the thing isn't about the thing? And do we
Right.
have the power to realize what we're doing and to reverse it or stop it?
Yeah, I think that we do. I mean, I think that, just being aware of it at all is a form of mindfulness. Because there are plenty of people that are just operating only from their pain and fear. And they don't realize that they are not their thoughts, that the mind has activities that don't always serve us, that there's someone else within, that you're not your thoughts, that you're the person who is aware of your thoughts. And so that's a pretty heavy concept for people who have not ever thought about that. And I would posit that probably a vast majority of people have not understood that about their lives. And so they come from pain, they come from abuse, they come from, they live in their memories of what happened, how they were wronged. They live in a future state, worrying about what comes next. We all do this. Our mind is like a room full of monkeys, right? Like it's always like, oh, that thing happened to me then. And then, oh my God, what if this thing doesn't happen? Or what if it does? Right? Like we know that, right? So, but if you can't find your center to go, okay, I'm here now, I can breathe. Or like, I'm really upset at my husband because he left a sock on the floor, and I'm like in a state of rage about it. But by the way, my husband is like the neatnik. He's the one who cleans up after me, whatever. Like I'm in a state of rage that the sock is on the floor again. And what does it mean? It means he doesn't love me. It means he doesn't respect me. He doesn't care about me enough to pick up that sock. Right. So like the sock is on the floor and that's the reality. But the story you're telling yourself about it is what makes you enraged. And so really you're not enraged about your husband or the sock. Maybe you're enraged about the lack of respect and attention that you received from your family of origin, how your voice wasn't heard or your needs weren't met. And so when you're in a state of rage that's completely outsized, or despair or sadness or depression that's completely outsized from what you have actually experienced, that's the moment where you have to sit and go, what is this? What is this? And I think Rosie has a number of those moments in the book, and that she's on that journey, she's on that healing journey, she's in therapy, she's trying to find solid ground for herself, but she has some things she has to work out.
And we all do. And when I read that, I thought, we're so quick to see it in someone else. Someone's upset with us and it's a minor thing and they're taking it out crazily on us and acting insane. And you're thinking, okay, you're not really mad at me about this. Maybe you are a
Right.
little
Yeah.
bit, but there's something else going on in your
Right.
life. But it takes real courage to internalize it and say, do
Yeah.
I do that?
Yeah.
I guess I
Exactly.
do. Yeah.
Sure. We all do. I mean, of course we do. It's a story. We are always telling ourselves stories, right? And so you might be a little bit mad about the sock, but you're not that mad about the sock.
I'm not mad about the sock. I'm mad about the dirty dishes. That's what I'm mad
Right.
about.
Be
And my
careful. He
husband
listens to our show.
Oh,
Um,
so So funny.
Now, I don't want to give anything away with this question, so I'm going to be careful. But
Okay.
Detective Crow says
Mm,
to one character, and this is a quote, "We always want to believe that the people we love are who we think they are."
yeah.
Now, this is truth. There's no doubt in my mind. We protect the reputation of people that we love and we care about. We might
Yeah.
withhold damaging information when we're talking about them.
Mhm.
We fill in the blanks, we make excuses.
Yeah.
Why is it so important for us to have some, you know, for people to be who we think they are? Why is that important to us internally?
Yeah, I mean, I think we make a lot of decisions in our lives based on the people that we've chosen to be a part of our experience, right? And so and it comes again from that, also from that space where you're attracted to a certain type of person. And if you're not well, if you're not healthy, if you're operating from pain and fear and abuse and whatnot, then you may be choosing somebody who is, on a subconscious level is feeding you back this, this version of yourself that you need to survive, or that you at one point needed to survive. So oftentimes we choose people in our lives, our friends, our spouses, our bosses, we may choose a life or a career that it doesn't, that, we think is one thing, but that is really something else entirely. And then when you're confronted with that truth, or if you allow yourself to be confronted by that truth, then you have to do something about it. And that's hard. That's really
Yeah.
hard. And you have to make yourself responsible. Like, I'm attracted to this type of person because I believe this about myself. And I'm on a healing journey. And now I no longer believe this about myself. So I have to get rid of all these friends that I no longer, I can't have that energy in my life. A lot of times you see that in addiction. They'll tell somebody who's recovering from addiction, you know, don't go to the same watering hole after work with the same people who are also drinking too much every night, because you can't break the habit unless you move away and find a new place for yourself. And
Yeah.
that is incredibly hard. A lot of times, you wind up, when you change yourself, you lose people that are very important to you, or that you think are very important to you, and it's incredibly painful. But like, if you're on that journey, you have to make that choice. So I think that is, why some people, you think, how did you not see this about him? I saw it about him. How did you not see it? Or about her? But they don't see it because, in some way they invited it, and to confront it would be to confront him or herself.
Yeah, very well said. Chris and I were talking beforehand about that's why it's so difficult to tell a best friend that, maybe their significant other is cheating on
Yeah.
them, because
Yeah.
now you have to square the
Yeah.
reality with your perception of who they are.
Yeah.
And wow, that was really interesting in
Yeah.
the
Good luck
story.
with that one. That usually does not go well.
Yes.
I don't know. Kristen and I love this topic of narcissism. And it
Yeah.
seems to be a hot topic today in the world because we all are dealing with it in one way or another. And we
Yeah.
love to do a deep dive into that just alone. And that was one of the things we loved about the book. There's so many different characters in this book that you might suspect. And
Mhm.
you really had me fooled. I usually can guess it right from the start. It's entertaining. Like Kristen said, there's a lot of layers. It's something we can relate to just for our readers. You're going to see a little of yourself in here, maybe some of yourself you don't want to even see now and then, but it's a great mystery, a great thriller. And before we let you go, will you give us a clue? What are you working on next that we can look forward to?
Well, the next book, I mean, I never talk about a book until right now. Like, in fact, this is like one of the first times that I'm talking about The New Couple in 5B. And I'm just now, even in this conversation, starting to get an idea of what the book is about.
Yeah.
So it'll be a little while. It'll be this time next year when we're talking about the next book, which is done. So let me suffice it to say, it's a psychological thriller, and bad things will happen. Of course. And also I'll say about it that it is based on an experience that I had during a travel to an exotic destination. Something occurred
Wow.
on that trip, and this book comes from that space.
And isn't it true though that we write a little bit about what we know or what we wish we knew? And all I
Right.
know is I hope
Right.
there's a dead body involved or something in there.
Well,
Maybe not.
Fictional.
don't say it.
All right. Well, it's been, as always, such a pleasure to have Lisa Unger back with Bookstorm a second time. We're absolutely honored to have her back here. As you know, we're big fans of her writing. So connect with her. You can find her on Facebook, X, Instagram, on lisaunger.com, where you can sign up for her newsletter. And Lisa, such fun to see you again. Hope to see you next year.
So great to see you guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.
Well, Chris, that discussion about intuition, boy, did that hit home. Just before we went on with Lisa, we were talking about that very thing that sometimes you've got to heed that little voice inside of you, but sometimes maybe it's more fear and you got to get to the root of what's going on there. And I loved that whole discussion. That was fascinating, but it reflects the story, and the story is deep, 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 deep. What do you think?
I love what she said, that fear seems to chatter, 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 keeps you up at night. You hear all these, be afraid, don't do this. But intuition gives you a very peaceful message, maybe one message. You better not go to that. You
Yeah.
better not do that. And
Yeah.
fear presents all the reasons why. I don't know about you, but as I get older, I have much less fear because I feel like my time is limited. This is the beauty of aging. And why not just risk it? Let's go for it. Let's take the chance, put yourself out there and do whatever you feel you are called to do. How about you?
I don't know, because the more law cases I read, the more I see where there's so many bad things that can happen. So I appreciate what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm not sure if it's a perception or if this is true, but I feel like the world is getting more dangerous. So that's an interesting viewpoint that you've got to explore for yourself,
Yes, you
right? And
do.
I've
But don't be
wow.
afraid of imprisonment, Kristen. You're not anywhere near that. Some kind of sentencing. You're not, I'll stand up for you. I'll be your witness. I also loved this whole theory in her book that you asked about, let's say it, a house being haunted. Does the house, apart from the people, have a presence? And my first inclination was no. But after I read this book and heard you two talking about it, I thought if you were to walk into my house right now without me home, and you were to go floor to floor, you would sense or feel a part of me and my husband.
Yeah.
And there would be a presence without us here because of what I filled it with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I had a house that I owned that my mom always felt uncomfortable in, and she felt unsettled in this house. And so, the source of the unsettling, people may differ. People may think it's something along the spiritual lines. They may think it's more of kind of a karma situation. Bad things happen in that house. Who knows? But I do believe that houses do give you a certain feeling, in buildings, where you walk in and you instantly feel a comfort level or something is unsettling to you. And again, I don't know the source necessarily, but there is no doubt that we get those feelings.
And what about, I thought you'd be interested when she said the land, the very land having a
Yeah.
presence. So I've been to Gettysburg, to the field.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
solemn.
Yes.
I have been to, okay, cemeteries, indigenous grave sites that homes have been built upon. You just went to Normandy, the
Yeah.
beach.
Yep.
I think you would maybe agree with me, but tell me, how do you feel when you walk onto that land, having known what atrocity or
Yeah.
murder transpired there?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There and Gettysburg, I'm going to agree with you on this. I felt a heaviness there, and it was as if the air was heavy, but it was that incredible history that took place, a lot of death and bloodshed, and at the root of it, hatred. And so I felt that presence. There is no doubt. I'm right with you on that one.
Mhm.
In this story, we're looking at a very historic fictional building in New York City. Have you ever felt that in a New York City location? Because you spend a lot of time there.
Well, let me say yes. When they have like a home show or a historic home that's open, or a museum that's housed in a house temporarily, showing an exhibit, yeah, you feel different things about a home. Okay, let's take it a step further, like the Biltmore. I was just there. Yes, you feel something very special about that house. Is it the furnishings? Is it the history of the family that's being told to you? I have to say, is it that the house truly has a presence, or is it our knowledge of the prior presence that causes us to want to see something? I don't
Mm,
know. Which came first? Is it because we know, or is it that we feel it and then we find out? Probably people will say a little of both. But I do think that you can't deny it.
yeah.
Definitely not. You too?
Yeah.
But
And I love
that's
that Lisa left that open in this story too.
she left it open, and I love everything New York City. And of course she had lived there. It makes total sense to me. But I love this old historic home and the absolute beauty of it. So this is the juxtaposition, because we walk in and we see opulence and
Mhm.
beauty, but amidst it, an evil history. Okay, readers, if that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will, because you are going to love this book. So let me just say, for our listeners, come on back and see us again. We have such a huge lineup ahead for summer. I'm just going to tell you the names of our authors. We have Mara Kubica, Michelle Gable, Dervla McTiernan, Susan Mallory, Heather Gudenkoff, Liza Palmer, Christopher Reich, Washbag Rice, Amiko Jean, Benjamin Stevenson, JD Parker, and Lisa Wingate.
Very exciting lineup. And listeners, we continue to grow because you're listening, you're tuning in, you are excited about these authors that are coming up. I think we have listeners now in 80 countries or territories, all 50 states, and 1,600 plus cities. We love it. We are so excited to be on this journey with you of diving deep into these books. So until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.